I'm not allowed to leave the stage. I have to introduce Stephen Kell and his presentation. So Stephen, can you join us?
Thank you. Everyone hear me? Perfect. I just wanted to say too, on that last slide, there's no option for Indigenous communities or organizations. Is there anyone else here from an Indigenous community or Indigenous organization? Awesome. And hopefully there's some online. And maybe next year too, we can try to increase the level of Indigenous engagement at this event, because I think it would be super important to have that. So today I'm going to talk to you about a project. There's lots of great Indigenous-led bat research going on in the province. This is just one project that's going on. So I'm going to talk to you about it today. Green button. And I'm going to practice my introduction in Anishinaabe so that we can all hear a little bit of that language. So just bear with me. Stephen Kell and the Disnakaz, Mashibiji Nadodem, Medogami Nadonjaba, Jaganash, Celtic Norse Nada, Shawanaga First Nation Nadonja Aki. And what this is saying is I've sort of Northern European heritage, and I'm not an Indigenous member, but I do work for Shawanaga First Nation and have the privilege of working there. And Shawanaga First Nation is part of the larger Anishinaabeg Nation, part of the Robinson-Huron Treaty. And Shawanaga has been doing work with many different species for a long time. We're located on the shores of eastern Georgian Bay, a really beautiful place. And the sort of area that we're interested in, that Georgian Bay, you sort of have this Canadian Shield, sort of boreal forest on the top half, and sort of deciduous St. Lawrence lowland, and sort of limestone escarpment on the bottom half. So a really different balance between one side versus the other. And we've been doing different bat work at Shawanaga for a couple of years now. And we want to expand that, see like bats, they're not confined to barriers or like map boundaries, reserve boundaries. So we want to see what are bats doing. They can travel far distances. Why not try to look at a larger scale of what they're doing? And also realizing too, Christy went over this map, there's a lot of data gaps within the bats here in Ontario. And so we want to try to fill some of these gaps. Here we have from some of our past projects, some additional gaps that we've filled in over the last couple years. And then also, on that sort of knowledge gap, just trying to realize, even, this is just an example, but noticing that sometimes even within maps and other projects like that, there's areas that get left out. So Manitoulin Island, a very large island in Ontario, getting left off this map. There's a book that we saw this summer that all the species range maps were left off of Manitoulin Island. So just trying to make sure that this is all included. Let's get these. We all know that. And so here we have Georgian Bay. We have all the First Nation communities around Georgian Bay. We want to look at what are bats doing on this larger scale. What are they doing within Indigenous communities? And we came up with a project, both Shawanaga in partnership with Myota Star, to help us with the fieldwork portion to do this much larger project. And as we know, First Nation land is some of the healthiest, most diverse land out there on the planet, and so it is a great place to help study bats in Ontario and learn more about them. And before we started this project, I just wanted to touch on sort of the consultation piece that Duty Consult, but at Shawanaga, we like to refer to it as more of a relationship building, so try to build that relationship rather than just doing your duty to consult, building that relationship with that community, with those individuals in that community. And the elders in Shawanaga often refer to it as T and Bannock, so like come sit with us and learn, meet with us, learn who I am first before trying to pitch the project sort of thing. So we reached out to all the communities beforehand, told them what the goal was, and then got all the community feedback, incorporated that in, and then later on, when we got funding, we had that relationship already started. We could reach back out and then continue building that relationship. And so in the first year of the project, sorry, it's a little small. I think like the slides got shrunk, but we had 6 communities, including Shawanaga, come on to the project. And then further into future years, so we're in year 2, going into year 3. And I just wanted to touch on capacity as well. So all the communities seen up here were interested in doing this work, but not every community had the capacity to do so. Some communities don't have lands departments, or it might just be one member. And so realizing that even if a community is interested, you might have to wait 2 or 3 years for them to build that capacity or help provide that capacity for them to be involved in the project. And so as the project has progressed, we see these communities coming on board and just sort of being patient to allow that participation. Yeah, great bunch of communities all coming together. And so the sort of project scope, we really wanted to focus on community engagement, getting members out to public bat nights, building that capacity, so making sure that we're providing training, providing baseline data for those lands departments within each community to be able to manage their own bats, and then also collecting a bunch of different data. So we have some acoustic monitors out, doing a lot of netting, tracking, and then also trying to collect TEK. And sort of our general goals is to identify critical habitat, and then if there were specific research questions, those were all left up to each individual community based on their own interests. And so over the past 2 years, we've done a whole host of netting, averaged about 4 nights in each community. We're sort of spread out over a large area, trying to get to all these communities and try to do it evenly. So roughly about 4 to 5 nights per community. We're trying to always include one of those public nights, so just a great way. We all know that once you see a bat up in your hand, up close, it just really makes you appreciate these little species and the way they move, the way they fly. Just a greater appreciation for them. And like releases, people getting slow-mo videos, always a huge crowd pleaser. I'll skip over that. And so we're doing a lot of tracking. So we're attaching radio transmitters to the bats, trying to get a whole host of the different species, focusing on females, but we're also doing males, juveniles, trying to do a large range of tracking to find those roosts or critical habitat. So here's just some of the species. So we've caught almost 500 bats in the last 2 summers. You can see there's definitely a big skew towards little browns. So we're trying to do the netting in sort of a variety of habitats to get all species, but we do make sure, like, we want to make sure that we get some bats within each community. So we sometimes always go to a known roost, get little browns, but we also do have a lot of capture success with little browns. And you can see here just the distribution of species caught, and then species tracked as well. So we've tracked six species, really trying to focus on the myotis as well as the migratory bats. And then to date, so roosts that we've found, critical habitat, this doesn't distinguish between maternity roosts and sort of day roosts, but we are having some pretty good success with finding swarming sites, some hibernacula, as well as different roosts. And then just roost by species. This isn't a concrete analysis or anything like that, but interesting to see just over time we're building up a fairly decent data set for this area. Roost type that we found, lots of building roosts. We're obviously catching and tracking a lot of little browns, so that is definitely building up that part. But we are finding different tree species. At the end of the year, so we have 3 years of funding, we're going to be going into a much bigger analysis on the roost species that they're using, the tree species, height of roost, diameter, brush height, that sort of thing. So I did cherry pick a couple key observations like Toby as well yesterday. So this was a really fun one for us. So we tracked a hoary bat in Shawniga. When we caught it, it was a lactating female, and then we were able to track it back to the same tree multiple times over that 2-week period, and we're able to get some really nice photos with its pups. Thank you, which is really great, and take all the characteristics of that roost. We had really good tracking success over the last 2 years with eastern smallfoot, so we've been able to track smallfoots on eastern Georgian Bay, northern Georgian Bay, Manitoulin Island, and on the Bruce Peninsula, and get roost features from that whole area. So we have a pretty good idea of different roosts around all of Georgian Bay. And then we're also sort of seeing other notable observations. I'm blanking on who saw this observations, but it was someone in this room. They saw a bat come out of a bat house in Killbear with a band on it. So we went there. We tried to catch the bat. We didn't get it, but we're assuming that it came from either Shawniga or Soxing, where we have banded a whole bunch of different bats, and it's about probably 3 kilometers from some of the banding sites in Wissahickon, but it's over 10 kilometers from Shawniga. So we're assuming that's where that bat came from. And then we're also using the MODIS network. So there's sort of an empty pocket up here at the top of the study. And then we're also assuming that bats are using sort of these migratory corridors. And also noting a very large wind farm along this corridor. So trying to see what these bats are doing through the MODIS network. So we've been able to place some MODIS in that area, try to fill those gaps over the last couple of years. And then we are starting to see, again, I cherry-picked a couple of these, but we're starting to see some trends where bats are moving in the swarming season. So we're going to look into this in future years. And then also starting to see a silver-haired bat, where they're going, those migratory bats, where they're going down into the States. Each year we have a knowledge sharing event. So last year we had one. This year we have one coming up in April, and it's with every community that's involved. We go over the results of the project, share those projects, get feedback from the communities, and then incorporate it into the next year of the project. So we're really excited to have our second year. We actually got some funding to have it in person this year. And then we have some future plans too, to try to just increase the engagement with Indigenous communities in Ontario, similar to sort of like the Indigenous Bat Network that was a couple years ago, trying to increase that engagement and have as much participation as possible. Again, a really important piece of this project is including that TEK. We have Michelle. She has a really great poster at the back. She's doing a really good job of trying to include this TEK into this project and in bat research. And then, yeah, sort of concluding, the importance of this project is really to try to increase that capacity within each community. Doing bat work, it can be really hard to get into, especially to try to start to go from netting if a community wanted to do that. So trying to be able to provide that opportunity to be able to net, even just do acoustics, is really important for each of these communities to be able to get that data, get that experience, and then be able to contribute back. So each community can manage those bats on their own land, as well as contribute to the larger data sets out there, and then also contribute and include that Indigenous knowledge. With that, I'll say chi miigwech.
Thank you, Stephen. If we have any questions, just put up your hand.
Thanks, Stephen. That was a really, really great presentation. Speaking about knowledge gaps and the potential for this research to kind of help fill those, I'm thinking about the COSUBIC assessment of the migratory species and the potential future identification of critical habitat and that kind of work. And I'm wondering if you think that, based on your results so far or what you plan to do in the future, that you know, with your observation of the hoary bat, for example, in the pups, that this could help identify migratory corridors. Like, you know, you said you were banding. Like, do you think there's potential that you could see if there are returning individuals, you know, along certain pathways, like within this network, or how might this this work contribute to that process?
Right. Yeah, great question. We have hopes that the data that we do collect can go towards that as best as possible. The first year of the project, we definitely had a lot more little browns. This past summer, we had good success with catching those migratory species. So I think next year, we hope that we can have success as well. And then hopefully, yeah, it will be able to provide some crucial data for that, as well as just try to have a place for comments if, like for a recovery strategy for those migratory bats, for the Indigenous communities to feel comfortable to provide those comments forward. So that's partly what we're going to try to do at our knowledge sharing event is sort of, yeah, have a good space where we can collect all those comments and provide it for the recovery strategy.
Thanks, Stephen. Great talk. I was just curious about something. You know, you said that there wasn't very many MODIS towers in that one like gap area, and then you had put some up there, which is super cool. And I was wondering if you had any preliminary results. Like I saw the one image with the arrow, but you were hypothesizing that the bats might be using these two migratory corridors. And I wondered, after you got MODIS data back, did you see that they were using those corridors or not? Or
definitely. This is all anecdotal. We haven't actually looked into any of it. Just like just looking at bats. They're definitely coming down the eastern Georgian Bay side, but we've had a lot of bats that actually cross over the whole bay. We're not sure if they're just not getting detected on the Bruce, but yeah, they'll get detected on Manitoulin Island, and then they'll get detected on the eastern shores. So it's potential that they're actually flying across the entire lake. Yeah.
was that white arrow that we saw? It was a direct arrow, and I wasn't sure if that was just like from point A to point B that the bat flew, and you only had those 2 data points, or if that was its actual path.
This is the path that MODIS says it took. There's multiple detections on the eastern shore, so it's not just like an error, but yeah, it's from the original location to multiple detections on the other shore. So, and for multiple species, so we have silver hair and little brown that it happened with. So,
I think that's all we have time for questions. So thank you very much, Stephen.